All right, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you all are doing good today. Let's begin. I see almost 12 people in the meeting room, so which is a good number to begin with. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I will quickly review the stimulus response model that we discussed last time, and soon after that, I will discuss the rest of my explanation related to stimulus response model, and at the end, I will stop to take your questions. All right. Before I began the other day, I told you that to study the effects of mass communication is a dominant area within the field of mass communication, and all the models that are related to effects model have an influential place in mass comm studies. So this was my first slide. Here I explained you what is the meaning of the word stimulus and what is the meaning of the word response. I told you that stimulus is something that that provokes anything, that triggers anything. And response is your reaction. Response is how you respond to that situation. I have already explained this. I'm quickly revising or reviewing what we discussed in our last class. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about what is a stimulus response model. Although this is something I already explained in my last class, here I will quickly revise what I explained to you. Okay, so I told you that a stimulus, according to a stimulus response model, a stimulus is actually a message that provokes a person to act in a particular way. So that would be called a stimulus. Uh, this a stimulus is meant for a receiver, an organism, which is denoted by the letter O, and an organism are essentially here human beings, us, masses, for whom messages are designed in mass media. Uh, to repeat, I already explained all of this in my last lecture. I am quickly reviewing the information here uh, that I explained last time. R, the letter R denotes to the idea of response, which means effects of media messages. So this is how the stimulus response model is known as SOR model commonly, which means uh, a, a stimulus goes to an organism, to a human being, and it leads towards a response to the message. This was my next slide, and this is where we left last time. I was explaining hypodermic needle and magic bullet. I told you the meaning of hypodermic needle. It means that the messages act as hypodermic needles do when a person is injected with a drug. So when a person is injected with a drug through a hypodermic needle, the drug goes right beneath his skin through the needle. And the purpose is to make the effect faster. And similarly, the idea of magic bullet was that media messages are very strong, and when they are transmitted through radio and through television, they hit audience like bullets that can pierce their eyes and that can pierce their ears. Such is the powerful effect of media. If we consider the history of this model, that it began around 1930s. That was the time when radio was a popular medium, and not only that, propaganda was also on rise. It was being used by Nazis to promote fascism in Germany. So considering that time period, of course, media seemed to be very powerful, and for this very reason many scholars actually got engaged in the study of media as a powerful medium in our society. uh, this information, this sentence that you see on the screen, it says that audience react in uniform and predictable ways. Now let's talk about the word predictable first. What is the meaning of predictable? Predictable means something which can be predicted, something which can be foreseen. According to stimulus response model, um, media persons can foresee the action, or the influence or the effect of masses. They can predict. So for example, when I say that, okay, if I transmit this news story, this is a controversial news story, and if I disseminate or broadcast this news story, it will create a chaos in society. You see, this is predictable. With now this theory argues or assumes that through media messages, you can predict audience reactions or audience responses, and also that audience respond to media messages in uniform ways. May I ask, what is the meaning of the word uniform?
Ma'am, uniform means in a stable manner.
Stable. Uniform essentially means same, in same manner, which means audience react in same manner, or like all audience react in same manner and predictable ways. Same means, so for example, i I disseminate a message for people of Lahore, and since I only want to communicate to people of Lahore, let's say I choose the medium of radio, and I choose the medium of FM 103. Now, FM 103 is a channel which is heard by people across the city. I disseminate this message through FM 103, and I give the message that let's plant trees on April the 20th. Okay? Now, are people going to respond to my message uniformly? Like, are all people who live in Lahore, are all of them going to respond to my message in the same way? It's not possible. It's quite likely that some people in the audience, they miss the message. It's also quite likely that although people receive message, they are not convinced enough to plant trees. It is also likely that although many people get my message, but they do not have time, or they have a prior commitment at that time, or they have a prior engagement, they are doing something else. So this sentence that you see here essentially is a sort of criticism on stimulus response model. The model assumes that audience react in uniform ways and predictable ways, but actually this is not possible, and this is not always. This is something that does not always happen. This is my next slide. Here we'll talk about some assumptions that are related to stimulus response model. The model presents the image of a society that has atomized individuals who act according to their personal interests and are not affected by social relationships and constraints. Let me tell you that when in the next slide, actually, we'll talk about features of stimulus response model. In both assumptions and features, we are talking about assumptions of model. Side by side, we are also talking about some criticism which was raised on stimulus response model. So uh, let me explain this point to you. Here, this means that according to stimulus response models, people act according to their personal interests, and they are not affected by social relationships. However, I think it is not true in most cases. So I will give you my example. Let's say if I want to choose a restaurant, um, let's say I am in a situation where I want to choose a restaurant, and to make my choice of the restaurant, I barely rely on social media. What I usually do is I am affected by my social relationships. I usually ask my friends or my relatives because I want to learn from their experiences. Okay, do you have experience of eating at this particular restaurant? How was your experience? Should I give it a try or not? That kind of thing. But comparatively, wait a minute, please.
Assalamualaikum, ma'am.
Yes.
मैम ये जो हमारी डिजिटल मीडिया पे बेसिकली इसको एक मैल डिस और मिस इन्फॉर्मेशन जो होती है और इवन के फेक न्यूज भी जो होती है वो उसके ऊपर ये अप्लाई हो सकता है मॉडल
uh,
क्योंकि वो बहुत उसका इन्फ्लुएंस डायरेक्ट बंदों के ऊपर होता है स्टिमुलस people
okay.
are influenced by that.
Yes, many times this happens, especially through social media, that people receive a message and without verifying the information, they act to respond to it. And yes, this can happen. But again, everyone is different. Audience are different. You see, the criticism on stimulus response model is that it considers audience to be uniform. So soon after, there was this sexual assault case on a child in Kasur, Zainab case, there was news on social media. People were demanding for public hanging of culprits. They were saying that such thing happened in Iran, see such thing happened in that country or that country. But most of that information, that their examples, especially, they were not accurate. They were not based on facts, and people immediately tended to believe on that. If you are referring to that, so but there are again many people who were putting their analysis and who were saying no, this doesn't happen in this country. Things are different. How can we go for public hanging? How can we go for a situation where the state becomes a spectator of for an act of violence, and that kind of information, if that makes sense. So the answer is yes. People can respond to a stimulus that they receive through social media, that they receive through, let's say, radio or any channel of information. But again, people are same. People, I mean, our desires, our response level changes from person to person. If you see a message which is related to, even you see, let's talk about the polio vaccination campaign. We have problems with people who are, let's say, in remote tribal areas of Pakistan. The government has had faced problems of vaccinating those people. So, which means they are not responding to the stimulus which is sent their way. So, what I am trying to say here is that people vary whenever it comes to their response level. Yes, stimulus is there in the form, and also it's not possible that everyone receives the message. It's not possible. Maybe people are receiving messages, but uh, they are not paying attention. Their level of attention may also vary. If, does this answer, Hadi?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Acha ji.
Ma'am, this is a linear model, right?
Bisma, your voice was lagging. I couldn't understand. Can you please write your question in the chat box? In today's model, just to quickly revise, we have talked about what is stimulus response model. I quickly revised the information that I discussed with you last time, and then I went over the features of the model and some assumptions of the model. And when we were talking about features and assumptions of model, I told you that side by side we were also talking about the criticism of the model. Is this a linear model? Yes, it can be sent. A stimulus response can be considered a linear model. You see, it essentially focuses on two elements. It says there is a sender and then there is a receiver. So from the message goes from sender to the receiver, and there is this direct link. It doesn't consider social interaction. It doesn't consider social structure. It doesn't consider the influence of friends, family, relatives, and all that. So it is a linear model. Yes, yes, Visma. Okay. With this, I would like to tell you that in our next class, we are going to discuss two-step. You can see in the chat box, I have mentioned that in our next class, we are going to discuss two-step flow communication model. This we will do on Friday. For Friday, most probably, I will send you the recording of the lecture. I'll not do a live session like this one which we are doing today. I will send you a recorded lecture, and please see the recordings of the lecture, and if you have any questions related to that, of course you can ask me that on Monday. Okay? Acha, let me tell you what is a two-step flow model, because before I leave I want to lay a background for you for two-step model so that you can make sense. Okay. Now, two-step stimulus response model says that information process happens just in one step. There is a sender, the information begins from sender and then it goes to receiver. Remember, there was a slide where we discussed that there is a direct link between sender and then receiver. So this is stimulus response. However, two-step flow model says that information happens in two steps. What are those two steps? That information begins from sender and then it goes to active users of media. And then from active users, the information goes to less active users. Okay, I will repeat. Information comes from a source, from sender. From sender, it goes to active users of media. From active users, the information goes to less active users. Okay, let me explain this with an example and then I'll ask you to come up with some more examples. So my father, he is an avid reader of the newspaper Nawai Waqt. I have seen him reading newspaper Nawai Waqt every day for almost a couple of hours. Like he spends almost a couple of hours every day in the reading of that newspaper. By the way, Nawai Waqt is like a family newspaper to me because my grandfather used to read it, and later my father and I mean, I saw my uncles and everyone in the family reading Nawai Waqt, and then my father kind of glued to it, got glued to this newspaper for the rest of his life. Even if my father is traveling and he doesn't have time to read the newspaper, I have seen him, what he does is he takes his newspaper, he carries his newspaper copy with him and he takes it with him, and wherever he goes he usually finds a corner or a space where he would go sit and read the newspaper for 2 hours at least a day. Now you see, in this situation my father is an active user of media, an active reader of Nawai. All right. Now, usually what happens is, and my mother usually doesn't pay attention to newspaper. It's not like she doesn't read, but she's not. It's not. She's not a, newspaper sort of person. She would read it just for if just for like if relaxation sometimes, but she usually doesn't pay attention to the content in the newspaper. So what happens is that whenever there is an important information from the government, important information about related to budget, important information related to, um, let's say there is an important information related to governmental policy or educational policy, uh, or any other thing, my father gets the information from newspaper. My father is an active user, and then he transmits this information to my mother and my siblings, my brothers and everyone. Okay? Now this is how the flow of information happens in two steps. From active user, my father is an active user, from active user to less active users. Okay? This is what the two-step flow model says. And now you see the two-step flow model here considers social relationships, that not everyone is an active user of media. Unlike stimulus response model, stimulus response model was saying that there is media, there is sender, information comes from sender and goes to media. That's it. However, this two-step flow model considers that not everyone is an active user, and the flow of information happens in two steps. From active user, from media it goes to active users, and from active users it goes to less active users. Now I'll stop here to take your questions if you have any. And of course, when you will see the recording of this lecture, this will make more sense for you. Any questions? Ahmad Altaf, Abdullah, Asif, Haram, Aisha Jat, Fatmeen, Kamal Zari, Maha, Maham Shamaz, Maida Abbas, Malaika, Maliha, Misha, Munisa, Mohammad Arbaz, Murtaza Haider, Ramsa Imran, Rohama, Usman Rizvi, Hadi, Usman Chaudhary, Bisma. Any
No,
questions?
ma'am. Thank you.
ठीक है चलें जी. If you do not have any question, I'll end today's session, and all the material is already uploaded on Moodle. Soon after I end this class, I'm going to upload a recording of this class on Moodle as well. And please do not hesitate to write an email or ask me questions if you have any. Okay? All right. Thank you and goodbye.
Khuda Hafiz, ma'am.
Allah Hafiz.